The massive transparent dome of Nexus Station hung suspended in the void between stars, its crystalline architecture catching and refracting the light of distant suns. Inside the central obsidian chamber, 47 species gathered for the Galactic Peace Summit, their representatives arranged in concentric circles beneath a ceiling that projected a real-time stellar map of known space. The chamber itself was an engineering marvel, walls of polished black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, accented with veins of luminescent blue mineral that pulsed in rhythm with the station's power core. Ambassador Thomas Harley stood at exactly 6 feet tall, unremarkable in stature by human standards, but noticeably smaller than most delegates present. His posture was impeccable, shoulders squared beneath his midnight blue diplomatic uniform adorned with the silver insignia of Earth's United Coalition. Despite being the newest addition to the Galactic Council, Harley carried himself with quiet confidence. His expression remained neutral, brown eyes observant as they scanned the assembly, noting alliances and tensions with equal attention. In stark contrast, Enforcer Voluona of the Zepyrian Empire dominated the central speaking platform, standing 15 feet tall. Her obsidian-scaled body gleamed under the chamber's lights, iridescent patterns shifting across her exoskeleton with each movement. The ornate golden armor she wore served more as a symbol of status than practical protection. Intricate designs telling stories of conquest across a dozen star systems. Her 4 arms, the upper pair more slender and dexterous, the lower pair thicker and clearly built for combat, gestured emphatically as she addressed the assembly. Behind her head, a crown-like ridge of crimson spines flared when she made particularly forceful points, and her voice, amplified by both technology and natural resonance, filled every corner of the chamber. The Zepyrian Empire has maintained order in the Orion Arm for 17 generations, Voluona proclaimed, her lower right hand resting on the ceremonial blade at her hip. Our enforcement fleets have prevented 3 major conflicts in the past standard cycle alone. Peace exists because we ensure it. Smaller delegates from various systems nodded in nervous agreement. The spider-like Arachnians, sensitive to political winds, clicked their mandibles in what passed for applause among their kind. The gaseous Meldorians, contained in their hovering pressure vessels, pulsed in submission. Yet now we face challenges from the newest addition to our galactic community, Voluona continued, her vertical pupils narrowing as they fixed on the human delegation. Earth demands equal standing without having earned it through centuries of service. They seek technological exchanges while offering minimal resources in return. Harley remained motionless, his breathing controlled, and even beside him, his assistant Kira tensed, her hand clenching around her data tablet. She was younger, more reactive, her dark hair pulled back in a severe style that matched her anxiety. Humans, Voluona pronounced the word with subtle disdain, believe they can bypass the traditional hierarchy of species advancement. They have barely mastered lightspeed travel, yet expect a seat at the high table. Her upper arms spread wide, addressing the entire chamber. They are insects who have crawled from their homeworld, only to demand the rights of apex species. The chamber hummed with nervous energy. Such direct insults were rare in these diplomatic settings, even from the notoriously aggressive Zepyrians. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, their translation devices buzzing with activity as they processed the inflammatory language. Kira leaned toward Harley. "Sir, protocol allows for a formal objection to—" But Harley raised a subtle hand to silence her. His expression hadn't changed, not even a flicker of anger crossing his features. Instead, he slowly rose from his seat, the movement so deliberate it drew attention despite its quietness. Voluona paused mid-sentence, her crimson spines flaring with surprise. Humans typically responded to Zepyrian intimidation with either fearful deference or ineffectual outrage. This calm, measured response was unexpected. Without speaking, Harley straightened his uniform, nodded respectfully to the assembly at large, and began walking toward the exit. No protest, no counter-argument, no plea for fair treatment, just quiet, dignified withdrawal. "Ambassador Harley," the moderator called, a gelatinous Zenthi, whose translucent body flashed with confusion. "The floor has not been opened for delegation movement. Please return to your designated position." Harley paused at the chamber door, turning slightly. "My apologies to the assembly," he said, his voice clear, but not raised. "I was under the impression this was a peace summit between equals. If Earth's delegation is regarded as insects, I see no purpose in remaining for what is clearly not a dialogue." He offered a small, polite bow. "I'll await notification when the Zephyrian Empire is prepared to engage in actual diplomacy." The door slid open, and he stepped through, leaving stunned silence in his wake. Volwona's spines flared to their full extension, glowing hot with a mix of rage and, for the first time in her long career as an enforcer, genuine uncertainty. In centuries of diplomatic intimidation, no lesser species had simply walked away from her. They begged, they argued, they sometimes threatened futilely, but they never just left. "This session is temporarily suspended," she announced abruptly, striding toward the exit. "The Zephyrian delegation requires consultation." As the massive doors closed behind her, the chamber erupted in whispers and urgent communications. The Meldorians pulsed rapidly in their containers, exchanging gases in their equivalent of excited conversation. The crystalline Lithians vibrated at frequencies that created a subtle, harmonic undertone of speculation. In the corridor outside, Harley moved at an unhurried pace, his footsteps measured on the polished floor. The corridor was vast, designed to accommodate species of various sizes, its ceiling arching 30 feet overhead, with illumination that mimicked natural daylight. The walls displayed shifting scenes from member worlds, currently showing the methane oceans of Zenthia Prime. He heard Volwona before he saw her, her footsteps creating minor vibrations in the flooring. Despite her size, she moved with surprising grace, covering the distance between them rapidly. "Ambassador Harley," her voice boomed down the corridor. "You have not been dismissed." Harley continued walking for several more steps before stopping and turning. Looking up at the towering alien, he maintained the same unruffled demeanor. "Enforcer Volwona, I wasn't aware that Earth's representatives required dismissal from those who consider us insects." Volwona's lower arms crossed over her armored chest, while her upper ones gestured sharply. "You insult the proceedings by your departure. The Empire does not tolerate such disrespect." "Interesting perspective," Harley replied, meeting her gaze directly despite the considerable difference in height. "I was responding to disrespect, not initiating it. But perhaps we have different definitions of the term." "You have no leverage here," Volwona hissed, her spines vibrating with irritation. "Earth needs the Empire's protection. The void is filled with predators far worse than us." "I'm well aware of the threats in our sector," Harley said. "I'm also aware that the Zephyrian Empire's expansion has slowed considerably in the past decade. Your resource acquisition rate has dropped 17%, according to your own Economic Ministry's reports." Volwona's eyes narrowed. "You've been studying our internal documents." "They're publicly available through the Galactic Information Exchange. I did my homework before coming to Nexus Station," Harley replied. "Just as I studied the recent rebellion on Zarian 7 and how much it cost your military to suppress it. Maintaining an empire through force alone becomes increasingly expensive over time." "You suggest the Empire is weakening?" Her hand moved to her ceremonial blade, an implicit threat. "I suggest that cooperation might be more sustainable than subjugation," Harley countered. "Earth doesn't want special treatment, we want equal partnership. We're offering innovative approaches to resource management and social governance that could benefit the entire galactic community, including the Empire." Voluona leaned down, her face now just feet from Harley's. Your species has existed for a cosmic eye blink. You have no conception of the forces at play. Perhaps that fresh perspective is exactly what's needed, Harley said. We haven't had time to become entrenched in outdated thinking. For a moment, genuine curiosity flickered in Voluona's expression. The humans were indeed different, not cowering, not raging impotently, but offering alternatives with calm assurance. It was intriguing. The Helix Nebula observation deck. 2 hours from now, she said suddenly. Come alone. We will continue this discussion away from the political theater. Without waiting for his response, she turned and strode back toward the chamber, her armor catching the light in flashes of gold and obsidian. Kira found Harley moments later, her expression a mixture of awe and horror. Sir, that was either brilliant or suicidal. The delegation is in chaos. Half think you've doomed Earth's application. The others think you've finally shown the backbone needed to earn respect. And what do you think, Kira? Harley asked, resuming his walk toward the human quarters. I think Enforcer Voluona looked rattled, she admitted. I've never seen a Zepyrian lose composure like that. But sir, she's dangerous. The stories about her campaigns on the Outer Rim worlds, they call her the Death Goddess for a reason. Reputations are often cultivated specifically to avoid testing the reality behind them, Harley said. The Zepyrian Empire maintains power through perceived invincibility, as much as actual strength. I'm more interested in what she said about meeting at the observation deck. Kira's eyes widened. You're not actually going... Of course I am, Harley said. But first, I need you to compile everything we have on Zepyrian psychological profiles, particularly Voluona's military record and personal history. There's something beneath the intimidation I saw it when she suggested the meeting. Curiosity, perhaps even doubt. You think you can turn the Empire's chief enforcer? I think all sentient beings respond to respect and genuine engagement, Harley replied. Even 15-foot alien enforcers with god complexes. The Helix Nebula observation deck occupied the uppermost level of Nexus Station, a half-sphere of transparent aluminum, offering unobstructed views of the spectacular stellar nursery beyond. Swirls of cosmic gas in brilliant blues and purples stretched across light years, punctuated by the brilliant pinpoints of newly forming stars. The deck itself was dimly lit, allowing the nebula's natural radiance to dominate the space. Harley arrived exactly on time, finding Voluona already present. She stood with her back to the entrance, her massive silhouette framed against the cosmic backdrop, without her ceremonial armor, dressed instead in what appeared to be more casual Zepyrian attire of layered silks over a fitted bodysuit. She seemed no less imposing, but somehow more authentic. The nebula contains 17 protostars that will likely develop habitable planets, she said, without turning. The Empire has already placed monitoring stations to observe their formation. In approximately 3 million years, they will be ready for colonization. Planning for the long term, Harley commented, moving to stand beside her, though still keeping a respectful distance. Zepyrians live for centuries. I myself am entering my 4th century, she replied. We think in time frames your species can barely comprehend. And yet both our species evolved from beings who had to focus on immediate survival. Harley observed. The capacity to plan generations ahead is a learned discipline, not an inherent trait. Voluona turned to face him, her vertical pupils dilated in the low light. You continue to surprise me, Ambassador Harley. Most species attempt to impress us with their accomplishments or resources. You offer philosophical observations. Understanding comes before cooperation, Harley said. I'm more interested in finding common ground than scoring diplomatic points. Is that why you walked away to find common ground? There was a hint of genuine curiosity in her tone. I walked away because remaining would have validated the premise that humans should accept a subordinate position. Harley turned his gaze to the nebula. The relationship between our species will be established by these early interactions. I refuse to establish a pattern of submission. Volwona made a sound that might have been a laugh. A strategic withdrawal rather than a retreat. Perhaps you understand power dynamics better than I assumed. She gestured toward the nebula with one of her upper arms. Do you know why I chose this location for our meeting? I assumed for the privacy it offers, Harley replied. Partially, she admitted. But also because this is where new worlds begin. From chaos comes order. From dispersion comes coalescence. The universe naturally moves toward complexity and structure. Her voice took on a different quality, less formal, more reflective. The Empire believes it is the ultimate extension of this principle, imposing order on the chaos of competing species and interests. And you, what do you believe, Enforcer Volwona? She seemed startled by the personal nature of the question. Zephyrian culture rarely distinguished between individual opinion and official position for those in power. I believe, she began, then paused, considering her words carefully. I believe that order is necessary, but I have begun to question whether our methods are the most efficient path to achieving it. It was a startling admission from the Empire's most feared enforcer. Harley recognized the significance of the moment, a crack in the monolithic facade that the Zephyrians presented to the galaxy. Efficiency is a compelling argument for any system, Harley acknowledged. Earth's history is filled with empires that fell, not because their enemies grew stronger, but because maintaining control became too costly. The rebellion on Zarian 7, Volwona said quietly. You mentioned it earlier. It cost us 12 capital ships and over 4,000 Zephyrian lives to suppress. A century ago, such losses would have been unthinkable against a lesser species. The universe is changing, Harley said. Information flows more freely than ever before. Ideas spread faster than fleets can travel. Perhaps it's time for governance to evolve as well. Volwona turned her gaze back to the nebula, her expression unreadable. You speak dangerous ideas, Ambassador Harley. I speak of survival, he countered. For all our species, cooperation isn't weakness, it's adaptive strategy. For several minutes, they stood in silence, watching the slow dance of cosmic gases in the void. When Volwona finally spoke again, her voice had lost some of its imperial resonance. The High Commander would have you executed for such talk, she said. But there was no threat in her tone, merely a statement of fact. And what would Volwona have? Harley asked, turning to face her directly. Their eyes met across the vast difference in height, a moment of connection that transcended species and politics. I would have continued conversation, she finally said. Tomorrow's session will address resource allocation for the Outer Rim territories. The Empire's position remains unchanged, but perhaps I will listen more carefully to Earth's proposal. It wasn't much, barely an acknowledgement, but in the rigid hierarchy of galactic politics, it represented a seismic shift. I look forward to it, Harley said with a slight bow. As they parted ways at the observation deck's exit, Harley felt Volwona's gaze following him. Something had changed between them, though neither could yet define exactly what it was. The following week brought a series of increasingly complex negotiations. In public sessions, Volwona maintained her intimidating presence, but her direct attacks on the human delegation ceased. Instead, she focused her criticism on specific proposals rather than Earth's legitimacy as a participant. It was a subtle shift that few noticed, but that significantly altered the dynamics of the discussions. Harley, for his part, continued his strategy of quiet confidence, presenting Earth's positions with clarity and responding to challenges with reasoned arguments, rather than emotional appeals. The other delegations watched the dance between human and Zephyrian with growing interest, sensing that some unseen current was flowing beneath the official proceedings. The true test came during the formal diplomatic reception held in the Grand Atrium, a vast space at Nexus Station's core, where artificial gravity had been reduced to accommodate flying species. Crystalline chandeliers floated like suspended constellations above delegates from across the galaxy, while service drones circulated with refreshments calibrated for various biochemistries. Harley stood conversing with representatives from the Lithian Concordance when Voluona approached, her ceremonial armor gleaming even more elaborately than usual. Behind her followed her personal guard, Zara, a Zapirian female nearly as imposing as Voluona herself, though lacking the distinctive crimson spines that marked the Enforcer's elite bloodline. "Ambassador Harley," Voluona announced, her voice carrying across the nearby conversations and causing a ripple of sudden silence. "I understand Earth has submitted a proposal regarding the disputed territories in the Perseus Transit Corridor." Harley turned calmly, aware that they now had an audience. "That's correct, Enforcer. We believe there's a solution that benefits all parties involved. A solution that conveniently grants Earth mining rights in a region traditionally under Imperial protection," Voluona stated, her tone challenging but not overtly hostile. "A solution that establishes a multi-species development consortium with proportional resource allocation based on investment and need," Harley clarified. "The Empire would maintain security oversight while distributing the economic benefits more equitably." Voluona's spines flared slightly. "The Empire doesn't share what it protects." "Perhaps that policy deserves reconsideration," Harley suggested, aware that dozens of delegates were now listening intently, especially in light of recent developments on Zarian 7. A collective intake of breath rippled through the gathering. No one spoke openly of the Zarian rebellion in official settings. It was considered a humiliating episode for the Empire. "You tread on dangerous ground, Ambassador," Voluona warned, taking a step closer so that she towered over him even more dramatically. "I'm standing on facts, Enforcer," Harley replied evenly. "The suppression campaign on Zarian 7 cost the Empire 12 capital ships, 4 Tu-33 Zapirian lives, and approximately 700,000 civilian casualties among the Zarian population. The economic output of the system has dropped by 63% since the rebellion, and reconstruction estimates suggest it will take 30 standard years to return to previous production levels." The atrium had gone completely silent. Even the service drones seemed to hover motionless. "Where did you obtain these figures?" Voluona demanded, her lower hands now resting on her weapons. "From the Empire's own military assessment, filed with the Galactic Records Office as required by treaty," Harley said. "Public information, though rarely discussed. My point is simple domination through force is becoming unsustainable, even for the mighty Zapirian Empire. Cooperation isn't just ethical, it's economically superior." Voluona's massive form seemed to expand as her spines extended to their full length, glowing with heat. The nearby delegates instinctively backed away, creating an open space around the confrontation. Zara's hand moved to her disruptor pistol, though she didn't draw it. "You would lecture the Empire on economics." On military strategy, Voluona's voice had dropped to a dangerous register. "Your species has barely established colonies on your neighboring planets. We've also never lost a colony to rebellion," Harley pointed out. "There may be advantages to our approach that merit consideration." Voluona leaned down until her face was level with Harley's, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her spines. "You have courage, human, but courage without power is merely suicide." Instead of backing away, Harley took a deliberate step forward, entering what would be considered intimate space in any culture. The move was so unexpected that even Voluona straightened slightly in surprise. "If you truly believe that power is all that matters," Harley said quietly, though his voice carried in the silence, "then I invite you to a private demonstration of what real strength looks like. No weapons, no guards, just you and me." Gasps and murmurs erupted around them. It sounded like a challenge to combat a suicidal proposition for a human against a Zephyrian, especially one of Voluona's stature. For a moment, confusion crossed Voluona's features, quickly replaced by intrigue. You challenged me to private combat, knowing I could break you without effort. I didn't specify combat, Harley replied with the faintest suggestion of a smile. I specified a demonstration of strength. Your quarters, 2 hours from now. Unless, of course, the Empire fears what it might learn. He delivered the last line loudly enough for nearby delegates to hear, effectively trapping Voluona. To refuse now would suggest weakness or fear anathema to Zephyrian culture. My quarters, 2 hours, she agreed, her expression unreadable. Come unarmed. As she turned away, Harley caught a flicker of something in her eyes, not anger, but curiosity, perhaps even anticipation. Kira intercepted him moments later, her expression frantic. Sir, have you lost your mind? You just challenged the Death Goddess to private combat. No. I invited her to a conversation she couldn't refuse in public, Harley corrected quietly. There's a difference. She'll kill you, Kira insisted. I've accessed her military record. She's personally executed dozens of planetary governors who failed to meet Imperial standards. That's her public persona, Harley said. I'm more interested in who she is beneath it. Besides, killing an Earth ambassador would create a diplomatic incident even the Empire would prefer to avoid. So your safety plan is banking on interstellar political inconvenience. Kira looked incredulous. My safety plan is understanding my opponent better than she understands herself, Harley replied. Now, I need the psychological profile we've been compiling. It's time to put it to use. The private quarters assigned to the Zephyrian delegation occupied an entire section of Nexus Station's diplomatic ring. Designed to accommodate their larger physiology, the rooms featured higher ceilings, reinforced furniture, and environmental controls set to the hotter, drier conditions preferred by their species. When Harley arrived, he was met not by guards but by Zara, who regarded him with open suspicion. The enforcer awaits within, she said, her voice gravelly even through the translation system. I have scanned you for weapons. Proceed. The main chamber was impressive, a vast space dominated by a central fire pit, where blue flames danced, casting flickering shadows across walls, decorated with Zephyrian military trophies and ceremonial weapons. The temperature was uncomfortably high for human preference, and the air carried the scent of exotic spices and heated metal. Voluona stood with her back to the entrance, still in her ceremonial armor, though without the more elaborate ceremonial components. The firelight played across the scales of her back, creating patterns of shadow and illumination. So, the human comes to his reckoning, she said without turning. I admit curiosity about what you believe constitutes a demonstration of strength. Understanding, Harley replied simply, moving further into the room. The strength to see clearly what others miss. Now she turned, her expression skeptical. Riddles and philosophy again. Practical assessment, Harley corrected. For instance, I understand that you were born to the third clutch of House Volus, traditionally considered less prestigious than the first or second. That you fought your way into the Imperial Academy, despite resistance from higher-born competitors. That you've achieved everything through merit, rather than birthright. Voluona's spines flared slightly. Basic biographical information, available in public records? True, Harley acknowledged. But what about your campaign on Drother 4? The official record states you crushed the resistance with minimal casualties. What it doesn't mention is that you first spent 3 months negotiating with tribal leaders, offering them regional autonomy in exchange for imperial allegiance, an approach unheard of in Zephyrian conquest doctrine. Now her eyes narrowed. How could you possibly know that? Because I studied not just what happened, but how it happened, Harley said. The pattern of your military movements doesn't match standard imperial suppression protocols. You surrounded population centers, but didn't immediately invade them. You established communication outposts before weapons platforms. Your supply chains prioritized medical supplies over ammunition. He took a step closer to her, his expression earnest. You're a builder disguised as a destroyer, Voluona. You've adopted the Empire's methods where necessary, but you've also quietly innovated when possible. You see beyond simple domination to sustainable governance. For perhaps the first time in their interactions, Voluona seemed genuinely stunned. Her usual imperial poise faltered as she processed his words. "You've been watching me very closely, Ambassador Harley," she finally said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "I've been seeing you," he corrected. "There's a difference." Voluona moved toward him, her steps deliberate. "And what else do you see?" "I see someone caught between duty and vision," Harley said. "Someone who excels within the system while harboring doubts about its foundations. Someone who understands that true power comes not from forcing others to kneel, but from inspiring them to stand alongside you." Voluona circled him slowly, her massive form making Harley seem small by comparison. Yet there was no intimidation in her movement now, only evaluation, consideration. "Dangerous insights, Ambassador," she said quietly. "If the High Command heard such things—" "They won't hear them from me," Harley assured her. "My interest isn't in undermining your position, but in finding common ground for cooperation. Earth doesn't want to challenge the Empire, we want to help it evolve." "Evolution requires the death of what came before," Voluona observed, completing her circle to stand before him again. "Not death," Harley countered. "Transformation. The caterpillar doesn't die to become the butterfly, it fulfills its potential." Something shifted in Voluona's expression, a softening around her eyes, a relaxation of her imposing posture. "You speak of things I've considered only in private moments." Thomas Harley. The use of his first name wasn't lost on him, a deliberate step away from formal titles toward personal connection. "Then perhaps it's time those thoughts found voice," he suggested. "Not as Earth's ambassador to the Zephyrian enforcer, but as Thomas to Voluona." She moved closer still, until she towered directly above him, looking down with an expression he couldn't fully interpret. Then, with surprising grace for one so large, she lowered herself to one knee, bringing their faces level with each other. "You asked earlier what Voluona would have, not what the Empire demands," she said softly. "The truth is more complex than I could admit, even to myself." "Sometimes the most difficult truths are the ones we hide from ourselves," Harley replied. Her upper right hand moved slowly, hesitantly, until her fingers, surprisingly delicate despite their size, brushed against his cheek. The touch was gentle, exploratory, her scaled skin warm against his. "In 17 decades of service to the Empire, no one has ever seen me as you do," she whispered. "They see the enforcer, the death goddess, the instrument of imperial will. But you—" Her voice trailed off. "I see Voluona," Harley said simply, reaching up to place his hand over hers. The moment hung between them, fragile yet powerful. Then, with a movement so swift he barely registered it, Voluona leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, an experiment in cross-species connection, then grew more confident as neither pulled away. When they finally separated, Voluona's spines glowed, not with anger, but with something like wonder. "This changes everything," she said softly. "It changes us," Harley corrected. "The rest follows from there." She rose to her full height again, but the movement no longer seemed meant to intimidate. Instead, there was a new awareness between them, an acknowledgement of their physical differences, alongside their newfound connection. "The Empire has surveillance in all diplomatic quarters," she said suddenly. "This conversation, what just happened, it will be reported." "I know," Harley admitted. "I counted on it." Voluona's expression shifted to one of surprise, then understanding, then reluctant admiration. You wanted them to see, to force their hand, to force change, he clarified. Some transformations need a catalyst. You've made me that catalyst, she realized. My loyalty will be questioned. I'll be recalled, possibly even. Or you'll become the voice of a new approach, Harley suggested. One that preserves the Empire's strength while acknowledging the changing reality of galactic politics. The High Command isn't monolithic. There are progressives even among the Zephyrian elite. They need someone of your stature to lead. Volwona was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. The risk is enormous, she finally said. So is the potential reward, Harley responded. Not just for us, but for both our peoples. Us, she repeated, testing the word. There is an us now. Isn't there beyond politics and strategy? I believe there is, Harley said. If you want there to be. Her answer came not in words, but in another kiss, more confident than the first, a seal on an unspoken agreement between them. The following morning brought exactly the response they had anticipated. High Commander Thne, a Zephyrian male of impressive age and traditional values, summoned both Volwona and Harley to a private chamber adjacent to the main conference hall. His ancient scales had faded to a dull gray, but his spine still flared with authority as he addressed them. Enforcer Volwona, you are temporarily relieved of your diplomatic duties, he announced without preamble. Your conduct has raised questions about your commitment to Imperial protocols. Volwona stood at attention, her posture perfect, but lacking the intimidating flair of her spines that usually accompanied official functions. I understand, High Commander. Thane turned his attention to Harley. Ambassador, this is an internal Zephyrian matter. Your presence was requested merely as a courtesy to inform you that the Empire will be appointing a new representative to continue negotiations. With respect, High Commander, Harley replied calmly. If the issue concerns interaction between myself and Enforcer Volwona, then it is by definition not purely internal to the Empire. The ancient Zephyrian spines flickered with irritation. The surveillance records show inappropriate fraternization between a senior Imperial official and a representative of an unproven species. The matter is clear. What's clear is that two diplomatic representatives engaged in private discussions about the future of galactic cooperation. Harley countered, discussions that might benefit both our peoples if allowed to continue. Benefit. Then scoffed. The Empire does not benefit from its enforcers forming personal attachments to lesser species. Perhaps that perspective itself requires re-evaluation, Volwona said, speaking up with quiet confidence. The galactic landscape is changing, High Commander. The methods that secured our dominance for generations may not serve us in the coming era. Thane's ancient eyes widened slightly. You suggest the Empire should change its fundamental approach to governance because of your indiscretion. I suggest the Empire should evolve because reality demands it, Volwona replied. The rebellion on Zarian 7 was not an isolated incident. Reports from 6 other sectors indicate growing resistance. Our fleets are stretched thin, our resources increasingly committed to maintaining control rather than expanding influence. This is not the venue for such discussion, Thene snapped. When is the venue? Then, Volwona pressed. In closed council chambers where only traditionalists speak, after another costly rebellion forces our hand, the Empire's greatness came from adaptation and strength, not rigid adherence to outdated methods. Harley remained silent, recognizing that this confrontation needed to play out between Zephyrians. His presence was necessary, but his intervention could undermine Volwona's authority in this moment. Thin spines flattened against his head, a sign of either deep thought or deep anger in Zephyrian physiology. You were our finest enforcer, he said finally. Your record of service is unmatched. Yet now you question the very system you've upheld for centuries. I question it because I believe in it, Voluona said simply. Not as it is, but as it could be. Stronger, more sustainable, truly eternal rather than merely long-lived. A tense silence filled the chamber. Then Thne made a gesture that neither expected. He lowered his head slightly, a sign of respectful acknowledgement in Zapirian culture. You will return to the homeworld, he said. But his tone had shifted from accusation to something more nuanced. The Imperial Council will hear your perspectives. Whether they find wisdom or treason in them remains to be seen. And what of Earth's proposals? Harley asked, finally speaking again. Then regarded him with ancient eyes that had seen empires rise and fall across the galaxy. They will be considered by Voluona's replacement, though perhaps with more attention than they might have received previously. He turned to leave, then paused. The Emperor himself will want to understand how a human ambassador managed to sway our most dedicated enforcer. That alone grants your species a certain interest in Imperial circles. After he departed, Harley and Voluona were left alone in the chamber, the significance of what had just transpired hanging between them. I'm to be recalled, Voluona said, though she didn't sound defeated, but not arrested or immediately stripped of rank. It's unexpected. It's an opportunity, Harley suggested, to speak directly to the Imperial Council, to present your vision for the future. Few ever get such a chance. And what of us? She asked, the personal question seeming strange yet natural amidst the political machinations. Harley stepped closer to her, looking up at her towering form with unhesitating affection. Diplomatic postings change. Relationships adapt. Earth and the Empire will need ongoing dialogue, regardless of who sits at the negotiating table. You believe we can maintain what we've begun across light years and political divisions? I believe that anything truly worthwhile finds a way, he said. And I believe what we've started both politically and personally is very worthwhile indeed. Her spines glowed softly, not with the fierce heat of anger, but with a warm radiance that reflected her emotions. Then, I will carry both visions to the homeworld, a new path for the Empire, and a new connection between us. And I'll ensure Earth's delegation continues the work we've begun, Harley promised. This isn't an ending, Voluona. It's a transformation. As they prepared to part ways, she to ready herself for the journey home. He to brief his team on the developments. Voluona paused at the door. The ancient texts of my people speak of destiny, that some are born to change the course of history, she said thoughtfully. I never imagined my destiny would be shaped by a human who refused to be intimidated. Perhaps destiny is less about what we're born to do and more about the choices we make when faced with unexpected possibilities, Harley suggested. Her smile, so rare and precious on her usually stern features, was answer enough. The formal announcement came the following day. Enforcer Voluona had been recalled to the Zapirian homeworld for strategic consultations. A junior official would temporarily represent Imperial interests at the Galactic Peace Summit. Behind the diplomatic language, everyone understood that a significant shift had occurred in the Empire's approach. What few knew was that before departing, Voluona had secretly transferred a substantial data package to Harley internal assessments of Imperial weaknesses, corruption among certain high officials, and evidence of resource misallocation that had contributed to recent colonial unrest. It wasn't treason, she had insisted, but patriotism of the highest order, providing leverage that could force necessary reforms from within. In the weeks that followed, Earth's delegation skillfully used this information to advance proposals that addressed these very issues, always presenting them as mutually beneficial rather than exploitative. The temporary Zapirian representative, lacking Voluona's authority, but also her intimidating presence, found himself gradually accepting compromises that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Reports from the Zapirian homeworld were sparse, but significant. Voluona had indeed addressed the Imperial Council. While the content of her presentation remained classified, The fact that she retained her rank and had been assigned to a special committee on strategic adaptation suggested her words had found receptive ears among at least some council members. 3 months after her departure, as the Galactic Peace Summit neared its conclusion, Harley received an encrypted personal communication on a channel known only to himself and Voluona. "Reform begins," the message read. "The Emperor has authorized a pilot program for collaborative governance in the Outer Rim territories. I return to Nexus in 2 cycles to oversee implementation. The Death Goddess died in the council chamber. Something new emerges. Something better. Something ours." As Harley composed his reply, he reflected on how far they had come from that first confrontation, from insults and intimidation to partnership and possibility. The journey ahead remained uncertain, filled with political pitfalls and personal challenges. The differences between their species, cultures, and positions would not vanish overnight. Yet in those differences lay the very strength they had discovered together, the power that comes not from domination, but from complementary perspectives, united in common purpose. What had begun as a diplomatic confrontation had evolved into something revolutionary, a vision for galactic governance based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical control, and a personal connection that transcended the boundaries of species and space. Across the vast distance separating them, 2 unlikely allies, perhaps more than allies, now worked toward a shared future. The 15-foot alien who had once laughed at humanity as insects now advocated for their equal place in the cosmic order. And the human who had refused to be intimidated continued to stand tall, not through physical stature but through the quiet strength that had first caught her attention. "Until your return," Harley wrote in his reply, "the work continues here, as does the waiting, both with purpose." In her quarters on the Zepyrian homeworld, Voluona read his words and felt her spines glow with anticipation. The path ahead would not be easy. Cultural change never was, especially for a species as long-lived and tradition-bound as hers. There would be resistance, setbacks, perhaps even danger as she challenged centuries of imperial doctrine. Yet, for the first time in her long life, she felt truly aligned with her deepest purpose, not as the Death Goddess enforcing imperial will through fear, but as a visionary guiding her people toward a more sustainable future. And not alone, but with an unlikely partner whose courage and insight had first challenged, then changed her. As she prepared for her return to Nexus Station, Voluona allowed herself a moment of reflection on the strange journey that had brought her to this point. How a human's refusal to be intimidated had led to the most profound connection of her centuries-long life. How walking away had been the action that finally made her pay attention. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. And perhaps, she thought with growing anticipation, a sense of possibility as well.